This is an RNZ podcast.
Just a quick warning, this podcast contains strong language and descriptions of violence some listeners might find confronting. So much of the material that's emerged since Ross Appelgren's 1992 retrial has raised doubts about his conviction. We've heard a lot of it already in this podcast. I can assure you, there's plenty more to come. But some of the new information points in the opposite direction, towards Ross's guilt. It includes reports of a late-night arson attack on the business premises of the Crown witness, Gordon. It happened only days before the retrial, and its significance is being reported here for the first time. Gordon wasn't there when the firebombing took place, but returned to find smoke rising from the building that housed his business. We can't provide any other specifics about what happened, as that might inadvertently identify Gordon, but we can say that the arson badly damaged his reception area. Fortunately, two quick-thinking local teenagers spotted the flames and used fire extinguishers to put out the blaze. Gordon had good reason to be unnerved. It was the second time in recent months he'd been targeted. Back in November 1991, just before Ross's retrial was meant to begin, unknown intruders tried to break into Gordon's home. As a result, he was placed under armed police guard. Neither those intruders nor the arsonists were ever caught. But in a May 1992 police report, detectives were quick to say who they thought was behind it all.
It was clear that both these attacks were instigated by the accused, Appelgren, to deter the witness from giving evidence in the pending trial.
When I first read this, I thought it was a big deal. If Ross or his associates were responsible, that's hardly the actions of an innocent man.
There's an acute lack of evidence connecting it to Ross.
That's Tim McKinnell, the investigator working on Ross's appeal.
I mean, the timing is curious. That certainly seems to be a strong piece of circumstantial evidence pointing to Ross, happening just before his retrial.
It would give reason for you to go searching for evidence, but the police are pretty candid that they don't have any evidence. And so if that is the case, then other than a hunch, what have they got?
Then there's the fact Ross was really confident of his chances at the retrial, as he told Pam Corkery in this November 1990 interview on Radio Pacific.
I'm not worried at all. I just feel confident about things.
Given that, would Ross have really run the risk of being caught arranging an arson attack on Gordon? A serious offence that could have landed him 14 years in the slammer. But as I read further through the police file, there it was. Another one of those pretzel-shaped plot twists we've become all too familiar with. So as it transpires, police were told the name of another possible suspect for the firebomb attack. Gordon himself. This is recorded in a police report dated December 1992 and revealed here for the first time. A person who knew Gordon, whose identity is redacted in the report, told the cops that Gordon had actually paid a guy $5,000 to burn his business down. When the deed was done, Gordon allegedly couldn't come up with the cash and was being chased for it.
So that is something that would warrant some inquiry as well.
In the police documents, I can't see that detectives looked further into the claim Gordon was involved. But I think there's reason to doubt he would try to burn down his own business. He had insurance, so did he do it for the insurance money? I mean, it's possible. But there's no proof he did. And according to police, the fire left Gordon in real financial hardship due to loss of income.
I don't know that we'll ever get an answer to that, but other than a bit of a whiff, there's not really too much to it. And, it wasn't a feature in the trial, and nor should it have been.
For me, it does, though, look really suspicious. And that's what this episode is about, at least partly, turning the microscope on Ross's claims of innocence. It feels the right time to do this, given where we're at in the story. A second jury has now been convinced of Ross's guilt, and 3 judges have dismissed his appeal. The Crown case, picked apart after the first trial, was seemingly patched up and made watertight. Or was it? Welcome to Nark, an RNZ investigative podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wesley-Smith. This is episode 14, Second Thoughts.
Can you hear me now?
I'm on the phone with Julie Appelgren, Ross's widow, someone who's convinced of his innocence.
I can, yes.
I've called Julie because her legal team have just received more disclosure from police relating to Ross's case. And no, it's not from the investigation file. That's still missing. Instead, these are police documents relating to their interactions with the Crown witnesses Ernie, Gordon and Martin. Not surprisingly, large parts of the documents were blacked out. However, there was a rather unusual redaction that stood out from the rest. It appeared on a copy of a newspaper clipping with a photo of Ross and Julie walking hand in hand on the street during the 1992 retrial. Smack bang in the middle of Julie's forehead was a little black redaction box. It was hiding something. But what? Julie's lawyer, Kerry Cook, queried the redactions and police eventually released that newspaper clipping with the curious black box removed. And there it was, 2 words in black ink on Julie's head. Stupid bitch.
Julie, what was your reaction to knowing that somebody had written that on a photograph of you, the words stupid bitch?
It doesn't actually bother me at all, Mike,
At this point, I'm thinking to myself, geez, Julie, you're taking this well.
because we had so much support. And if there was the odd negative person around, so be it. Nobody said it to my face.
For her, it was just another reminder of days past when judging looks were thrown her way when she got hitched to a convicted murderer.
I was in it for the long haul. There was no question of that. So if I was stupid in somebody's eyes, so be it.
I mean, we don't know for sure who wrote it. No. Given that it appears in a police file, that it's possible it was written by a police officer.
Yeah.
I try with, particularly with older cases, not to be too judgmental about, cops being a bit sloppy, a bit unprofessional.
That's Tim McKinnell again.
It happens.
Yeah.
But what surprised me is a decision was made to redact that. I'm not sure that the Official Information Act, the Criminal Disclosure Act or the Privacy Act allow you to redact things because they're embarrassing.
And that was a recent decision that then got reversed.
That's right.
Let them, whoever, if they're still around, say it to my face. It doesn't worry me. But yeah, totally unprofessional.
Yeah.
Totally unprofessional. But there are so many good coppers out there that it doesn't matter to me. It just doesn't matter.
I think you once said to me you developed a thick skin through this process, and I think that comes through in the way you've responded to this.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, yes, because it was my business. We had 18 years of marriage. We went through hell.
Yeah.
With the case, with the ups and downs and everything, but it was never going to be something that I walked away from. But he would be stoked to know that it's all moving forward again. He would be very, very happy.
As I've mentioned, I never got to speak with Ross before he died.
The strange thing about it was that I think he knew far more than he ever told.
But over 4 years in the 90s, journalist Keith Davies did more interviews with Ross than anyone else. And like me, Keith's mind was animated about what Ross really knew about the murder of Darcy Tahira.
He'd been brought up in this criminal environment where you didn't narc on anyone else. And he lived by that. Even though I think he could have saved himself going to jail on reflection, I think he could have told far more than he did. It's just that he had this strange, really strange belief that you didn't narc on people, even if your own freedom was at stake. Now, I don't know how many people actually live by that, but he did. It's bizarre.
Defendants like Ross don't have to prove their innocence at trial. It's a cornerstone of our justice system that the onus of proof rests solely with the prosecution. The defence need only raise a reasonable doubt. But in the world of podcasts, rules of procedure shall we say, are a little less stringent. Remember, Ross didn't just say he was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. He testified twice in his own defence and maintained outright he had no role in Darcy's death at all. After the many months I've spent on this case, I definitely have questions about this claim and whether Ross knew more than he ever said. So here's what I think are some of the holes in Ross's defence. First, and I think we've covered this off, is the timing of his alibi, the toilet break. Ross said at the retrial he wasn't sure when he left the kitchen. I found this odd. I mean, if you're charged with murder, wouldn't you have replayed over and over in your head what exactly you'd done and when you did it during the relevant time frame? Compounding this is the evidence Ross gave at the first trial, his own timeline, which could have placed him in the kitchen when the Crown says Darcy was bashed. Ross testified he saw Darcy coming in at around 7:30. Ross then said he went to the toilet a few minutes later, which would be, let's say, between 7:30 and 7:35 a.m. That means on Ross's own timeline, he could have been in the kitchen during the period, which was 7:20 to 7:30 a.m, when the Crown says Darcy was attacked. Second is what Ross did when he left the kitchen. Now at the retrial, you'll remember a former inmate, who we've called Felix, testified he'd seen Ross coming back from the toilet. Let's assume for argument's sake that Felix's evidence is accurate. Why hadn't Ross mentioned Felix before the retrial? I would have thought someone in Ross's predicament would have, from the start, thought really hard if there was anyone to confirm his whereabouts, particularly when he was relying on an alibi defence. I mean, surely you'd remember the guy you saw in the corridor and tell anyone who would listen about it, wouldn't you? Third, and I think this one is really important. Why did Ross not tell police on day one he couldn't have killed Darcy because he was elsewhere when it happened? His first opportunity was when he spoke to a detective the day after the murder, the 7th of January 1985. Instead of explaining he was in the toilet, Ross told the detective,
I'm not saying nothing about Darcy or any of the others. I'll just tell you what I did. I just cooked breakfast and didn't see nothing at all.
And at his retrial, Ross testified,
I've never talked much to the police, as my record will show, but if my solicitor tells me to answer questions, I will, but if my lawyer is not present, I won't.
Now I can understand Ross adopting that stance if he felt he was being treated as a suspect. But during that first interview, Ross was being spoken to not as a suspect, but a witness. That's a crucial difference. In fact, the first detective who interviewed Ross wrote this in his job sheet.
Not a likely suspect for the assault, judged by his general background and demeanour during interview.
So why didn't Ross just defend himself? Say, I don't know, Mr. Detective, it couldn't have been me because I was answering the call of nature, or something like that. Or was the silence because the toilet trip was a lie he later dreamed up because he was, in fact, the killer? Or was there something else at play, like that criminal code of silence we've heard so much about, the no narking rule? We certainly knew Ross was a staunch proponent of the code, as he told journalist Keith Davies in 1994.
It's just a code that I've been brought up with, all my life. I've been in jail all my life, since 67.
But would those values, that belief in the code, have even stopped him from saving himself from a murder conviction and a life sentence? I've really struggled to believe its hold on Ross could extend that far. Because during my investigation, I've come to doubt how influential the code really was on inmates, particularly when they were pushed into a corner. I mean, there were plenty of examples in Ross's case of inmates defying the code to help police, such as Ernie, Gordon and Martin. But it's hard to think of a tighter corner than the one Ross was in. And finally, if Ross did have any information about Darcy's murder, why didn't he give it to the police, if only to take the heat off himself? If Ross wasn't the culprit, at the very least, in my book anyway, he was a witness. But even while he testified for his life, Ross never pointed the finger of damnation at anyone else. And it's not as if he wasn't given the opportunity. At the first trial, prosecutor Stuart Grieve probed Ross about any prior knowledge he had about the circumstances surrounding Darcy's death.
Before the 6th of January, that's the Sunday, had you heard anything to the effect that he had ripped someone off?
Not that I can recall, no.
And at the retrial, Prosecutor Bruce Squire also put Ross's prior knowledge under the microscope.
Do you know more about the death of Tehira than you have told us here today?
No, I do not.
Seeing the significance of the point that Squire was exploring, the trial judge, Justice Thomas, gave Ross yet another opening.
You are not able to say whether you saw anything or heard anything that might have assisted the police at all?
After the event, the whole kitchen was talking about it, but it was just hearsay.
Outside of the courtroom, TV3 journalist Keith Davies tried as well. First, in 1992.
Who did do it?
I don't know.
You have refused to cooperate with the police in this murder inquiry. Why?
Well, I've never been inclined to do that with the police. For anything.
You were facing life.
Yeah.
And you still wouldn't sort of perhaps indicate to them who you thought might have done it?
No.
Why not?
It's just the way I've been brought up. It's the life I've lived. I was a criminal, been a criminal all my life. And I wasn't going to break that code.
And yet there were people dumping on you all over the place.
Not my kind.
Then again, in 1994.
All these years inside, were you never once tempted to say, look, I can't prove this, but I suspect that who did it was this guy or these guys?
No.
Why not?
It's just nothing to do with me.
Nothing to do with you. And yet you've been in jail all these years.
I can sleep at night. There's a lot of other people involved in this that can't. They know that they've lied, they know that they've done wrong.
Sitting on the outside is a woman waiting for you, waiting to marry you, to spend the rest of her life with you. For her, couldn't you tell?
I couldn't know. I don't know who did it. I have my ideas, my views on it, but I didn't see it get done, and I couldn't stand up and say that I saw it done on who by.
But it was in an interview with Keith for Metro magazine in 1996 that Ross went further than he ever had before.
I was aware Tehira was in for a bashing because the word was that he had done a rip-off and was going to get a bashing, but nothing more than that. I had a fair idea of who was in on it, but I wasn't 100% sure. There was about 3 or 4 who I thought were going to be in on it, with 1 or 2 giving him a bash, while 1 or 2 kept an eye out.
If what Ross is saying here is true, his prior knowledge that Darcy was going to be attacked was also highly relevant to his alibi defence. It means he had a good reason for leaving the kitchen in the first place, not just to nip out to the dunny, as he led the juries to believe.
When Tehira came into the kitchen, I was thinking, I don't want to be near this, just in case. You never know what's going to happen. The screws might get a bit upset about it or something. I wasn't thinking it would go that far. I don't think anyone was. Anyway, I took off down the toilets, and when I came back, it was all over. But that's what I've always said. I never saw it done.
In my book, this information would also have been highly relevant and helpful for the police to know. At the very least, it presented lines of inquiry that detectives could have pursued. But instead, Ross kept all of this to himself, even while under oath at his 2 trials. It's even arguable Ross committed perjury at both trials when he denied knowing anything. There's another theory I've heard that, if true, could explain Ross's silence. Now, I have to be upfront and tell you, there's not much behind this, but I'll tell you it anyway. It was one suggested to me by former Parimoremo guard, Hone Hauraki. You might remember, he's the guy that foiled Ross's attempt to do a runner after a visit to the optometrist in September 1985, shortly after Ross had been locked up for Darcy's murder.
He just kept coming around straight at me, and I just felt like into a rugby tackle, and I just put him down.
And he reckons someone had been helping Ross.
Absolutely, man. He couldn't have been done that by himself. Not a shit show.
Right, and you said that a theory was that it was some kind of payback. Payback for what?
Well, you can take the assumption that payback's a lot of things, eh? One was that he's taking the heat off whatever went down.
Taking the rap for it.
He's taking the rap for it,
right.
Eh? So therefore, you guys owe. He's owed. He's owed a debt, eh? And how are we going to pay him back? Well,
Hone emphasises this idea was just a rumour, and he has no idea who Ross might have taken the fall for. But it was one he said was doing the rounds amongst inmates at the time. I also spoke with a guy who'd done some burglaries with Ross back in the day. He told me when he heard Ross had been charged with murder, his first thought was also that Ross had taken the rap for someone else. Nonetheless, as I mentioned to Hone, it just seems simply bizarre to me that Ross would do something like this.
Because I suppose, like, for a layperson like me, why would he take a rap for a murder?
Ask yourself that, bro. Hey, ask yourself that, eh?
Is that just him being stupid?
Well, not really. Whoever ordered it, in my view, whoever ordered it came from higher up. You know, hey.
Okay, and was there...
That's all I'm saying, but I can't, you can never prove it.
And without proof, it's just a theory. Another dead end. I've often wondered if Ross was still around, what would he say to all of these questions? He'd now be in his early 70s. Would the effects of that so-called criminal menopause mean he no longer felt captured by the Crim's code of silence? Because it's that code that's almost always used to explain why Ross didn't say more when he was alive. And I came to believe, however much it didn't make sense to me, that Ross was perhaps the code's most loyal disciple. But, again, it's a question I keep coming back to. If Ross wasn't involved in Darcy's murder, why not just say something, anything, to help himself? I decided to ask the person who knew Ross better than anyone else, Julie.
Did Ross ever tell you who he thought was responsible?
No. And I know he said to my daughter, if I knew, then I wouldn't be here anymore.
Do you think if he knew who was responsible and was confident about that enough to formalise it somehow, but because he had this adherence to the criminal code of silence, do you think he would have gone to the police?
No.
Did you ever understand that point of view that he had? Because obviously on a certain level it seems illogical, right?
No, I understand it.
Yeah.
I do now. Well, I did. I learned.
Was it ever personally frustrating for you though?
But I can understand why.
Yeah.
I can understand the code.
Right.
And that would be his choice or anyone's choice.
If I have all these questions, and some of the answers could be quite damning for Ross, then there's a good chance that the Crown have identified them as well and may look to raise them to counter Ross's appeal. Ross's legal team will need to have a response, so it made sense for me to put these points to Tim McKinnell. Let's start with the timeline of the murder.
I think you need to be really cautious about how much importance you place on timings.
Remember, prosecutors said Darcy was attacked between 7:20 and 7:30am. Ross told his first trial he thought he'd left the kitchen a couple of minutes after Darcy entered, which Ross put at around 7:30am.
Would you agree he conceivably could have been in the kitchen when the Crown says the murder occurred?
Yeah, look, I think that's possible. And it would be difficult to rule him out on alibi. Like it would other people too. And so I think we just need to treat that with some caution.
Tim makes the point that back in 1985, Mount Eden wasn't equipped with the modern technology that exists in prisons nowadays. For example, there's no CCTV, electronic doors or swipe cards that leave timestamps, making it easier to build a timeline. Also, it's not clear from the police investigation whether any of the inmates in the kitchen had watches or if there were any clocks in the area.
I think in broad terms, the timings are important in terms of the window, but probably more important than actual timings is sequences. What happened first and in what order is more important than exactly what time things occurred.
Okay, so let's look at what Ross said was his sequence of movements. He said after leaving the kitchen, he went to the toilet where inmate Felix later saw him return. But Ross didn't mention to the police that he had an alibi and an alibi witness when he was first interviewed.
In an ideal world, you would do those things, but again, the context is prison. You say as little as you can. You clearly don't want to put yourself in legal jeopardy, but nor do you want to start inviting scrutiny on other people that you're in prison with for all sorts of reasons, loyalty, protection of them, and it's just not the done thing.
And so what would be your response to the suggestion that he didn't volunteer, information like his alibi because A, he was the killer, and B, the alibi defence was just something he came up with after the fact?
Well, that's the risk you run when you don't provide a full and frank account with all the details. There's a term, phenomenology of innocence, where if you know you're innocent, you are pretty relaxed about what you say because you don't believe you're going to be convicted for something you didn't do, and that can lead to a sense of that you're not really in any legal jeopardy because you didn't do it.
Of course, the other reason Ross cited for not speaking with police was his allegiance to the criminal code of silence.
It's becoming rarer and rarer, but there is a generation or two of people that maintain that code, and many of them have graduated and now live lawful lives, but they still wouldn't breach that code. I'm aware of people that have done long legs for crimes they didn't commit, and that was what was expected of them, and they don't complain about it.
And is it therefore like they're doing so under some form of threat or duress?
Or loyalty, just loyalty. It doesn't need, there are some people that are so loyal to their group, to their friends, to their associates, that they will do that. They'll take one.
I also asked him for his take on Ross not telling either of his trials what he told Keith Davies in 1996.
I was aware Tahira was in for a bashing. I had a fair idea of who was in on it.
When he was asked at both trials if he had any kind of forewarning or prior knowledge of the attack, he says no. Doesn't that raise the question that he may have committed perjury at those trials?
Well, that's certainly something that the Crown would put to any future jury or appellate court when assessing his credibility. The point I would raise is there an alternative explanation for not having told that account, if it's true, from the outset? And again, we go back to the minimisation of your interaction with authorities, what you tell them about yourself and others. You minimise that, you stick to the code. That information that he provided to the journalists was 10 years after he was convicted, and you could reasonably assume that he realised then that he needed to come clean. He's out of prison. The circumstances have changed entirely, but he is still convicted of murder.
Now, the point has to be made. All these problems with Ross's version of events will fade away if Julie's legal team can unravel the evidence used to convict him. And as fate would have it, in the months after the retrial, two pillars of the prosecution case, the testimonies of Gordon and Martin, would begin to look very shaky.
309 3099 is the talkback number. 15 minutes to 12.
It's just before midnight on the 30th of August 1993, more than a year on from Ross's retrial. And Radio Pacific host Alan Dick has a new caller on the line.
Yeah, listen, I was going to have a talk. I was one of the guys in with Ross Appelgren when he got charged with that murder.
Yeah.
This is the real Martin, but as no one's allowed to identify him by court order, we've distorted his voice. Martin's the witness that flipped on Ross and said he saw him kill Darcy. For reasons that still remain a complete mystery, Martin called into that Radio Pacific talkback show hosted by Alan Dick. This is an actual recording of the broadcast.
I was going to have a chat to you about it, but I decided against that because I could end up in a bit of trouble myself. But
Despite its extraordinary subject, to me, this conversation had a typical late-night talkback feel to it. A caller in the small hours who sounded a little lonely, in need of a stranger's perspective. Mind you, Martin didn't have some gripe about the weather or power prices. His conversation was much more serious.
Tell me, do you think he did it?
Well, I gave evidence to say that I saw him do it.
Oh, I see.
At the first trial, I gave evidence to say that he was somewhere else. I saw him somewhere else, you know.
Why'd you change your mind? To where you saw him?
Well, like I said, I can't say too much.
No.
I think I should really speak to a lawyer before I say anything, you know.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Goes around here.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, my credibility's not the best, I suppose. No one knows what to believe.
I'm thinking at this point, Martin is not wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like I'd like to help Ross if I could, but...
You've got to look after yourself too.
Well, yes. That's all I've had to do that all my life, you know.
Yeah. You okay on top of it all now?
Big man?
You on top of it all now?
No, it's bothered me from day one.
Yeah.
Martin then touched on a part of this whole case that does bear thinking about. The risk secret witnesses like him face when they give evidence in these types of cases. This is why the Witness Protection Program exists.
I know, I've had to walk around looking over my shoulder for the last 6 months, wondering if I'm going to get bashed. For saying what I've done, but what I said, you know.
Yeah. Do you think that somebody might be after you?
I don't think they're after me. But, you know, I was trying to got at it in jail. They didn't succeed. But, I get locked up in protective custody all the time. And I spent 6 months just about locked in my cell 23 hours a day. I certainly got nothing out of it from anybody in the way of monetary gain or anything. I had it's been said that I got charges dropped, drug charges dropped, done deals with police in Australia, which I never.
Yeah.
I went to court for it, got fined and paid the fine. And when I got back here, I got a jail sentence.
Now, what Martin said there is not the entire truth. It turns out he did get something for testifying against Ross. You may recall that before Martin made his fateful trip to Sydney, where he got busted with drugs, he already faced burglary and driving charges back in New Zealand. When Martin returned to Auckland just before Ross's retrial, he planned to plead guilty to his charges. But then police did something interesting. They successfully pushed for Martin's sentencing to happen on a date after Ross's retrial. Here's Tim McKinnell.
Yeah, really worrying. What we've seen and what we're starting to see more of is that these arrangements are a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we'll sort you out after the trial.
Martin did get sorted. He got 6 months knocked off his 18-month jail sentence for helping the cops convict Ross. So a clear benefit to Martin. But here's the kicker. It wasn't disclosed during Ross's retrial because it hadn't happened yet.
The police well know, as do the Crown, that any inducement to a witness before they give evidence is highly problematic and probably ought to be disclosed. But if there's no inducement, there's no benefit, there's no favour offered before the trial, then they can answer somewhat honestly that that's the case.
It's important to point out there is no clear evidence that there was a nudge-nudge, wink-wink arrangement reached between Martin and police. But an internal police document says, quote, "It is also desirable, from our point of view, to have the homicide trial out of the way before Martin's matters are dealt with."
Yeah, and if it's not always explicitly the case, but you can infer it. And I think it's been one of the tactics that's been used over the years and may well have been used here.
And if you're thinking, come on, was it really a clear-cut quid pro quo? Well, the New Zealand Herald's November 1992 article on the sentencing has the judge saying it's established principle that offenders who help with the identification of other criminals can ask the court to take that into account. Tim says what happened with Martin's deal will be highlighted by Ross's lawyers at his appeal.
I don't think today, certainly the senior courts, would tolerate that sort of backroom deal where the inducement is delayed.
Okay, let's go back to that late night talkback call in August 1993 and to when host Alan Dick asked Martin the $1 million question.
Well, why'd you do it?
Give evidence?
Yeah.
Only I know that, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, it was. Sometimes we do things, and we've all been guilty of it. We do things in the heat of the moment, and
I regret getting involved in it in the first place. I wish I wasn't even there, you know, in the jail itself.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you wish that.
When I come out of jail, I didn't want to be there, and if anything did happen, I didn't want to, you know, certainly didn't want to have any family.
Yeah.
You hear stories all the time, you know, that people getting bashed up. And
Who put the pressure on you?
I'm putting pressure on me. I wouldn't say it's pressure. I got this terrible, like, it happened that long ago, and from the day it happened, I for some reason think that I believed something in my own mind, and like I told that many people, that I actually ended up believing things myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we've all been guilty of that sometime or other.
Yeah, but I don't see it as being guilty. I actually believe, even to this day, what I said was true, but then I don't think it is.
I'm going to repeat what Martin said, just because I think it's significant. He said, I actually believe, even to this day, what I said was true, but then I don't think it is. What specifically was Martin referring to here?
You know, I think I put something in my mind and told that many people that I ended up believing things myself.
Wait, I think that you need to see a lawyer.
Mm.
You got somebody?
Oh, I do know lawyers, yeah. But I just don't want anything more to do with it. I don't want nothing to do with it, you know?
Yeah.
I just...
But you could be the catalyst and...
also go to jail too, couldn't I, if they find I've told lies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I certainly don't want to do.
All right. All the very best there.
Mm.
Okay.
Cheers.
Good on you.
I've lost count of the times I've listened to this call, trying to interpret its individual parts to see if I could work out exactly what was troubling Martin. Where I got to is this, and this is just my guess, but it sounds to me like he's suggesting his evidence at the retrial may not have been correct. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find Martin to ask him. Who knows? Maybe he'll hear this podcast and get in touch. The next crack in the prosecution case against Ross also begins with a phone call. In May 1992, a TV3 producer called Keith Slater, one of the most respected journalists of his generation, received an unexpected call. For 2.5 years, Slater had worked with Keith Davies reporting on Ross's legal battle. In fact, it was Slater who first assigned Ross's story to Keith.
I was in the office one day and my producer, Keith Slater, I think he'd heard from someone and he put me on the story. And I just started working on it.
Slater died in 2017, but in the box of Ross's legal files, I found his affidavit describing what a certain someone had rung him to say in May 1992.
He had information about the Appelgren case which would be of interest to me.
Slater attended the retrial and recognised the voice of the man on the phone. It was Gordon, one of the prosecution's main witnesses.
I went to his address late one weekday evening. He told me then that Appelgren had not been the murderer and that he, Appelgren, had not taken any part in it. The discussion was inconclusive because he did not give any other specific facts at that stage.
Slater left the meeting empty-handed, and that's how things stayed for more than a year. The delay ended up being quite significant because it meant what Gordon had to reveal didn't come in time for Ross's October 1992 appeal. Instead, it was in August 1993 that Slater got another call from Gordon.
He indicated that he had fresh evidence that would clear Appelgren. I arranged for him to meet at my office as soon as possible.
It took months for a meeting to be arranged, but finally, on the 13th of May 1994, Gordon walked into Slater's TV3 office.
He indicated to me that he was feeling guilty and remorseful and basically wanted to get things off his chest.
Remember, Gordon testified that Ross confessed to smashing Darcy with the paddle. Now it was Gordon who had a confession to make.
He told me he'd lied at both trials. He was very open about it.
Realising the importance of what Gordon was saying, Slater rung Keith Davies and put him on speakerphone.
I got a phone call from Keith Slater, who was my executive producer. He then informed me he had a man in his office. Mr. Slater identified the man but we knew him to be a protected witness who had given evidence at both Appelgren trials. That's when Slater switched the speakerphone on and we had a three-way conversation between Slater and myself, and he admitted that he'd lied. At both trials, I questioned him, and from his voice and manner, I believed he was indeed the man I'd heard give evidence at the second High Court trial. He then proceeded to tell us the reason why he had lied. And this was because the police had offered him early release, a new passport, and offered to arrange for him to leave the country. And the police told him he had to say Appelgren told him that he had bashed Tahira and would be looked after in the above manner if he repeated all that. So the police were effectively telling him what he had to say. Now that's what he claimed.
Yeah.
All right, I have to stress that's what he claimed.
Yeah. Gordon also revealed to the journalists the people he claimed were actually responsible for Darcy's death. I'll come back to this because there's a bit to it. But for now, I'm going to stick with Gordon's retraction of his trial evidence.
Your impression of the way he recounted that was, it seemed believable.
Yeah, it was credible. Didn't understand why, because we weren't paying him anything and he wasn't getting anything out of it. That's when we knew, because we believed him. Why did we believe him? Well, I mean, he was admitting to perjury.
Now, I discovered this wasn't the first time Gordon had apparently cast doubt on his own testimony. You might recall I briefly mentioned Ross's lawyers got a statement from an inmate that formed part of Ross's first appeal in 1986. That inmate, whose name I won't use, said he'd spoken with Gordon inside Addington Prison in Christchurch before the first trial. In his statement, the inmate said Gordon had told him
he had been subjected to extreme pressure by the police to give evidence against the person charged, and he had already given exaggerated evidence because of this. When I asked him what he meant by exaggerating his evidence, he told me that he gave evidence about seeing things which he had not actually seen.
Back in 1986, Gordon wrote an affidavit denying the inmate's claims.
I have never discussed anything about giving evidence with this inmate. I have never been subjected to any pressure from anyone to give any evidence or make any statement.
The Court of Appeal didn't place much weight on the inmate's statement either. But more than 7 years later, Gordon was apparently at it again. On the 22nd of June 1992, around a month after the retrial, Ross's mum, Iris Appelgren, got a series of calls out of the blue. They were significant enough for Ross's lawyers Peter Williams and Bob Hesketh to ask Iris to write down what the caller said. She did just that, and I have a copy of the note she made. We've had an actor voice her words.
A man phoned first claiming to be Ernie and later changing to Gordon. He said he had information that would get my son Ross Appelgren free and pardoned. I told him to phone either Mr. Hesketh or Mr. Williams, and he said he would if I gave him their phone numbers. I queried him on his height, hair colour and stature. It did sound like Gordon. He thought Ross had done it, but now knew otherwise. He kept saying he wanted money up front. Something signed tonight. And when I asked him where he thought the money was coming from, he said Ross would get $750,000 from damages, etc. I said even if Ross ever got any money, it could take years. And he said the lawyers could pay it.
What's interesting to me is that this call to Iris happened to be around the same time Gordon called Keith Slater at TV3.
He then said he and his wife would come round and talk to me as he knew my address. I told him he was not to come near here and again said to ring either Bob or Peter. He said he would and we left it at that.
There's no record of Gordon ever contacting Ross's lawyers, which meant this information wasn't used in his 1992 appeal. Also, the fact Gordon was asking Ross's mum Iris for money seems a little off to me. Then again, didn't Ernie also request payment from police for his evidence? Fast forward to mid-May 1994, and Gordon was inside TV3 saying his trial evidence was a pack of lies. After their meeting with Gordon wrapped up, both Keiths prepared affidavits describing what Gordon had said. Of course, they also reported on their scoop in a story aired on TV3 in May 1994. Here's part of that broadcast.
A secret prosecution witness whom we are prohibited by law from identifying sat in this office and confessed to the executive producer of 2020, with myself listening on a telephone conference call, confessed that he committed perjury at both trials, lied to the court when he said Appelgren had told him he killed Darcy Tahira, lied because the police offered him early release, a new identity and fresh passport, all of which he claims to have obtained.
We now have new insight into Gordon's experiences during this period, which I can report for the first time. Gordon had left the Witness Protection Program in October 1992, but police remained in touch with him because Gordon kept getting arrested, mostly for driving charges. In May 1994, when Gordon spilled the beans to Keith Davies and Keith Slater, police records showed Gordon's relationship with the detectives had gone sour. He'd been charged with assaulting a neighbour and got angry when it wasn't withdrawn by the cops. An officer recorded Gordon as telling him in May 1994 that he, quote,
refuses to assist police at any future trial because of the way he's been treated by us.
A few weeks later, police dropped the assault charge, but Gordon again told the police
he wouldn't give evidence even if there was another trial for Appelgren.
That outburst came only 2 weeks after Gordon had told Keith Slater and Keith Davies his evidence against Ross was all lies. What's also interesting is that the police documents show detectives were aware of Keith Davies' reporting on Gordon's retraction of his trial evidence. Nowhere can I see if police asked Gordon if he still stood by his testimony. That they didn't seems strange to me, given lying on oath is a serious criminal offence. But Gordon's surprises don't end there. I want to pick up on the revelation I mentioned briefly before, where Gordon told Keith Slater and Keith Davies about who he thought murdered Darcy Tahira.
He indicated that the culprits were involved in a gang, Black Power, and that it was drug-connected.
Just for some context, at the retrial, Gordon told the jury there were Black Power members in the kitchen that were mates with Darcy. Guys Darcy smoked dope with. Of course, Gordon didn't tell the jury anything about Black Power being involved.
Gordon said a former member of Black Power somewhere in South Auckland knew more about it, but that was as far as he was prepared to go. He didn't name names. He was most emphatic. Appelgren wasn't involved.
Gordon's claim that it was Black Power members who killed Darcy seemed like a curveball. It was a while ago now, but right back at the beginning of this podcast, various inmates suggested Darcy himself had been a Black Power associate. So the question is, would the gang have murdered one of their own? Well, according to a former inmate who contacted Keith Davies in 1994, the answer was yes.
Our man had been present in the area of Mount Eden that they called the Dome, where Darcy Tahira had been threatened with death by the Black Power gang leader.
The former inmate told Keith he only wanted to be referred to as Billy, and his words were voiced for TV3 by an actor. Billy went on to describe for Keith a whole new scenario as to why Darcy died.
Contrary to what the police have said, Darcy Tahira did not owe drug debts. He was dealing in drugs in the jail and he was attempting to stand over a gang member for a cut of the drugs.
How do you know that?
Because quite by accident, I was standing there when the argument broke out between the two of them, between Tahira and the head of that particular gang.
Billy didn't name names, but said this argument took place the day before the murder, 5th of January 1985. He claimed Darcy told the Black Power leader he wanted a quarter of the gang's drug trade, otherwise Darcy would stop bringing it in for them.
I was standing there when the head of that gang said, "You want a cut? We'll give you a fucking cut. We're going to fucking kill you, asshole. You're fucking dead." I've seen some serious people in my life, and this guy was serious. I freaked out. I stood there, and when they finished arguing, I just looked at this guy and walked off.
It's been almost 10 years now. How has it been kept quiet for so long? How do you keep a secret like this?
It's very easy. Never tell the truth. Now, I know for a fact that a number of inmates offered information to the police specifically about it because it was common knowledge that Darcy Tahira was dealing and smuggling drugs into the jail. I know for a fact that police officers told Crims to fuck off, and their words were, "Fuck off, you don't know what's going on, you're not in the kitchen." And I know for a fact that happened on at least 4 occasions. Police officers refused to take evidence from people offering it because they felt they had nothing to do with it.
Billy told Keith Ross Appelgren was not involved in the murder.
Did Appelgren know this?
I don't know what Ross Appelgren knows. He's in a position where he can't actually afford to say anything. You know, he's a stand-up crim. He's not going to put someone else down for it. He's an old-school crim. He didn't do it, but by the same token, he's not exactly going to stand up and put someone else under for it.
After the interview, Billy put Keith in touch with another inmate who wanted to be known only as John Clinton. Like Billy, he said he feared for his safety if his real identity was revealed. John Clinton told Keith he also witnessed the argument between Darcy and the Black Power leader, and that Ross wasn't the one who killed Darcy.
The word was that it was 2 prospects, that is to say people who wanted to be in the gang and to prove their eligibility, they had to do something. And in this case it was kill the fella. Or was it just to beat him up? And did they go over the top? We don't know. There are question marks about that.
Billy and John Clinton signed affidavits confirming what they told Keith.
We gave it to the Justice Minister, Doug Graham, who was really interesting on this. He was concerned about the whole thing because we were filling him in and supplying him with the affidavits and what have you. He never took a position publicly on it, but he was very, a good man.
We approached Sir Doug Graham for an interview for this podcast, but he declined. There was another interesting point, though, that both Billy and John Clinton made to Keith Davies. If Ross had killed Darcy Tahira, a Black Power associate, wouldn't the gang have sought revenge against Ross? Ross and his lawyers repeatedly made the same point for years. In a 1988 affidavit, Ross said,
I do not know whether there is any way I can argue this in law, but I would ask that the fact that I have never asked for protection from any other inmate be considered against the fact that several members of the Black Power gang, with which Darcy Tahira had affiliations, told police officers during the inquiry that they would deal to whoever had harmed him. This is recorded on police job sheets. I meet and work with Black Power members at Paramaribo and have never been threatened because they know that I did not kill Tahira.
And here's Bob Hesketh speaking with Tim Bickerstaff in 1989 on Radio Pacific.
The guy he was supposed to have killed was a member of the Black Power. Has there been any retribution to him from members of the Black Power that are in prison at present?
No, none to Ross whatsoever. And I was speaking to a friend of mine last night about the article, a close friend of mine who's not a lawyer. And he singled out that particular feature in the article as being the most telling, if you like, evidence, if I can use that expression, the most telling evidence that the man was innocent.
As Ross said, this argument probably couldn't be used in court, but it makes sense to me. I asked former gang leader and Mount Eden inmate Whiki Taito what he thought. He knew many of the Black Power members in the prison at the time. How would they have reacted to Ross attacking Darcy?
A picture of him. It's somebody hitting you, member of your club, and you're not doing nothing about it. No, they would have backed up on that, 100%.
And by backed up, you mean they would have?
Yeah, they would have
attacked Ross.
Yeah.
If they believed he'd done it.
Yeah.
And would they have been able to establish who had done it? Do you think?
Yeah, the police report it. Yeah.
Police investigation documents also described Black Power members being in the kitchen when Darcy was killed. Of course, if Ross attacked Darcy on behalf of Black Power, then that might explain why they never went after him. We now know that's what some detectives thought happened. In one police report dated the 11th of May 1992, just before the start of Ross's retrial, a cop wrote,
Tahira's death arises out of drugs being stolen from the Black Power, and for reasons unknown, Appelgren has attacked Tahira in retribution for the theft of the drugs.
Okay, a couple things to say about this one. Firstly, at Ross's trials, prosecutors never said Ross was somehow acting on behalf of Black Power when he killed Darcy. And secondly, Ross's prison file, which covers the decades he spent inside, said he wasn't linked to any gang.
I mean, it'd be hard for me to imagine him being censored to do it.
Whiki Taito also doesn't buy the idea Ross did a deal with Black Power.
Because he's not a gang member.
Yeah, he's not a member, for a start.
So if you're a betting man, would you put your money on Ross being the killer?
Oh.
No. For the reasons you mentioned.
Yeah. It's just impossible. It would have been just impossible for him to have got away with it for the blacks if he had done that.
And
they were sure what's up.
Yeah.
That's why they would never enough.
They didn't accuse me. They weren't angry. In fact, a couple of them said, "Is there any way we can help you?" But there wasn't. I was friendly with them in Parry Max, friendly with them at Kaitoki, friendly with them at Medium Parry. I've never had any problem with the blacks or any of them, actually.
It's a view shared by former Parry prison guard Hone Hauraki, who observed gang culture behind bars for years. So for someone like Ross, who has no known gang links, he always said, well, look, if I had done it, then the Black Power would have got me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so he would say the fact that they didn't shows that they think he was innocent.
Yeah.
In my view, the possibility Darcy was killed in a gang hit definitely warrants further investigation. But this doesn't ever seem to have been properly considered by police. None of this backtracking, second-guessing, and the doubts raised by the actions of these two Crown witnesses, Gordon and Martin, has ever been considered by a court. It's never been tested, and neither has this theory that Black Power prospects could have killed Darcy over who profited from the drug trade inside Mount Eden. But if you thought that was a big deal, well, there's something even bigger you need to know about. Again, something the jury in the retrial weren't told. A confession.
Stood there categorically and said that himself had organised the hit, and he said he organised it with an inmate by the name of...
Immediately said that it was nothing to do with Appelgren.
That's all ahead in the next episode of Nark. Thanks for listening to Nark, hosted and written by me, Mike Wesley-Smith. I'm also extremely grateful to everyone who spoke with me for this podcast, especially Suzanne Young and Julia Appelgren. And if anyone listening has more information about this case, I'd be keen to hear from you. Send an email to nark@rnz.co.nz. Follow and listen to Nark wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've enjoyed it, use the share button to recommend it to a friend. Some more quick thank yous to Ngā Taonga and Mediaworks for some of the archival audio, and to the voice actors who helped bring some of the characters in this episode to life. Matthew Tunison, Craig Genty, Hamish Webber, Duncan Smith, William Ray, Jeremy Rees, Tim Watkin, Tony Stamp, Jack Sargent, Kay Garton, Daryl Stack, Stephen Parker, and David Reed. The RNZ producers who worked on this episode were Liz Garton and Justin Gregory. The audio engineer was Mark Chesterman. Thanks also to Steve Burridge and Jeremy Ansell for the studio wrangling, and to Kevin Golding for opening the doors to me every week after hours. Graphics were designed by Amrita Marks, and the shorthand page where you can find more information on this story was made by Hingyi Kong. Check it out at rnz.co.nz/nark. Tim Watkin is RNZ's Executive Editor Audio, and Brianna Uritich-Gregg is the Production Coordinator. You can find more of RNZ's great podcasts, like 30 with Guy and Espiner, on the RNZ website, rnz.co.nz/podcasts. Check them out. Bye for now.